All right, we're in Daniel chapter 5 today, the handwriting on the wall. Let's go ahead and read the whole chapter this time. All right, Daniel chapter 5. I'm reading out of the ESV version, English Standard. King Belshazzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in front of the 1,000. Belshazzar, when he tasted the wine, commanded that the vessels of gold and of silver that Nebuchadnezzar his father had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem be brought, that the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought in the golden vessels that had been taken out of the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem. And the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Immediately, the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace opposite the lampstand. And the king saw the hand as it wrote. Then the king's color changed, and his thoughts alarmed him. His limbs gave way and his knees knocked together. The king called loudly to bring in the enchanters, the Chaldeans, and the astrologers. The king declared to the wise men of Babylon, "Whoever reads this writing and shows me its interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom." Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or make known to the king the interpretation. Then King Belshazzar was greatly alarmed, and his color changed, and his lords were perplexed. The queen, because of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banqueting hall, and the queen declared, "O king, live forever. Let not your thoughts alarm you or your color change. There's a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. In the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, made him chief of the magicians, enchanters, Chaldeans, and astrologers, because an excellent spirit, knowledge, and understanding to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve problems were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now, let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation." Then Daniel was brought in before the king. The king answered and said to Daniel, "You are that Daniel, one of the exiles of Judah, whom the king my father brought from Judah. I have heard of you, that the spirit of the gods is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now the wise men, the enchanters, have been brought in before me to read this writing and make known to me its interpretation, but they could not show me the interpretation of the matter. But I've heard that you can give interpretations and solve problems. Now, if you can read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around your neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom." Then Daniel answered and said before the king, "Let your gifts be for yourself. Give your rewards to another. Nevertheless, I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation. O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father kingship and greatness and glory and majesty. And because of the greatness that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would, he killed, and whom he would, he kept alive. Whom he would, he raised up, and whom he would, he humbled. But when his heart was lifted up, and his spirit was hardened, so that he dealt proudly, he was brought down from his kingly throne, and his glory was taken from him. He was driven from among the children of mankind, and his mind was made like that of a beast, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. He was fed grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, until he knew that the Most High God rules the kingdom of mankind and sets over it not humbled your heart, though you knew all this. But you've lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven. And the vessels of his house have been brought in before you, and you and your lords, your wives, and your concubines have drunk wine from them. And you praise the gods of silver and of gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which do not see or hear or know. But the God in whose hand is your breath, and whose are all your ways, you have not honored. Then from his presence the hand was sent, and this writing was inscribed. And this is the writing that was inscribed: Mene, Mene, Tekel and Parsin. This is the interpretation of the matter. Mene, God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then Belshazzar gave the command, and Daniel was clothed with purple, a chain of gold was put around his neck, and a proclamation was made about him, that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. That very night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was killed, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. All right. First of all, let's look at a little background of this passage. Now, what happened last time? Where were we? Remember? The last chapter was all about, it was the letter that King Nebuchadnezzar wrote after he was humbled and became like an animal for 7 years. And then he came to his senses. He knew that the Lord had put him in charge, that made him king, and he wrote a proclamation to all known peoples. So everybody knew about that. But after that, he actually ruled a little more than a year, and then he did die. So I'm sure that whatever he went through had a toll on his body. But he had ruled 43 years as the king of Babylon. After that, his son, who was called Evil Merodach, ruled for 2 years. His brother-in-law, a guy by the name of Neriglissar, murdered him. He ruled about 4 years and 6 months until Nabonidus beat him to death and took the throne. No, wait, that's not right. He ruled about 4 years. Then Labashi, I better put my glasses on.
Yeah, try.
Labashi Marduk, who was they says it was an imbecile. He was his son. He served about 6 months until Nabonidus beat him to death and took the throne. Nabonidus had been a military leader. And interestingly, he had an adopted son who happened to be the blood grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, and his name was Belshazzar. Now, throughout this passage, you're going to see Nebuchadnezzar referred to as his father. The language has no word for grandfather, so it's all the same. They call it father, but he was actually his grandfather. In 555 BC, Nabonidus marched an army westward to conquer rebels who had revolted against Babylonian rule since the death of Nebuchadnezzar. Before he left Babylon on this expedition, Nabonidus entrusted kingship to his oldest son, Belshazzar. So they were really co-regents. This is the king who's the main character in Daniel chapter 5. All right, so let's look at this closely. We see that King Belshazzar made this great feast for 1,000 of his lords. And so they were all together in this great big banquet hall having a really good time. And then what did they do? What did he just... Right. Now, Nebuchadnezzar had been king for 43 years. But Daniel was a close friend. He really respected Daniel, and he knew that the objects from the temple in Jerusalem were holy, and so he had never touched them. But here is this guy, he's just all puffed up with pride, and he decides to go get these these gold and silver vessels that were taken from Jerusalem, and he's basically just snubbing his nose at God. Says, my gods are more powerful than your gods, than you are. So, and these items had actually, why it was so serious is these items had been consecrated to the Lord. They were holy, and only the priests were to touch them. All right. Archaeologists have actually found what they believe to be this banquet room. It's about 55 feet wide and 170 feet long. There's a plastered alcove that could have been where the handwriting took place. Now, it was an Oriental custom for the king to sit alone at a separate table that was raised up, elevated, so that everybody could see him. So he's up here at the end, elevated, looking over everyone. Several ancient sources indicate that the Medo-Persian troops, under the leadership of King Cyrus, had conquered the areas surrounding the city of Babylon, perhaps as much as 4 months prior to the night of this feast. This would explain why so many Babylonian officials were in the capital city at this time. Over here in chapter 1, it's a great feast for 1,000 of his lords. They were all there because they came to the city that was a fortress before the advancing Medo-Persian army. The army was right outside the walls, and Babylon was actually cut off from outside help. But, we've talked about how great Babylon was. He had made Babylon into the world's greatest fortress. The outer wall surrounding the city was so thick that no battering rams or other instruments of warfare were sufficient to knock it down. The presence of a second inner wall and numerous fortress towers and ramparts made any attempt to scale the walls suicide. As a result, Babylon appeared to be impregnable. Belshazzar and his officials were convinced that the Medo-Persians could not penetrate these amazing defenses. But even if the defenses could keep them outside the city, how long could the Babylonians inside hold out against a blockade? They would need food and water, right? Well, remember we said that the Euphrates River ran right through the city, and so they had solved this problem. The river flowed through the city at all times, and it provided a constant source of fresh water. In anticipation of a blockade by Medo-Persia, the Babylonians had supplied the city with enough food to maintain its population for more than 20 years. Ancient historians indicate that in light of all these great preparations, the people of Babylon laughed at the siege of their city by the Medo-Persians. They were safe, they had enough food and water, they weren't worried about it. So it seems rather obvious that Belshazzar decided to desecrate the sacred vessels of Jehovah for one major reason, just to show utter contempt for the God of Israel. And there had been prophecies that they'd heard about the fall of Babylon. We'll even remember the statue, the head of gold, and then he told them that the arms were Medo-Persia, that was going to be the next kingdom. So that was prophesying the fall of Babylon, but they were impregnable. They were safe. That was not going to happen. And so he decided to challenge this God. And so his defiling of the vessels was his way of shaking his fist at God and saying, "You have said that Babylon will fall to the Medo-Persians who are now encamped outside our gates. I'm declaring to you that Babylon will not fall. Its defenses are impregnable. No one will be able to take it." So, once again, a pagan king was providing God a splendid opportunity to demonstrate his sovereignty.
Yeah.
All right, now notice that in verse 5, as it says they drank wine and praised the gods out of these vessels, and then verse 5 starts with immediately. It's like as soon as he took a drink from the holy vessel, this happened. The fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall. Can you imagine? I mean, he's up here on this elevated dais, and there's this wall beside him, and there's this big hand that starts writing on the wall. And notice that it says, opposite the lampstand. I actually just noticed that today, that it was opposite the lampstand. There was a lampstand there to make sure that it was visible to everyone. It might have been dark and dimly lit in there, but there was a lampstand, and this happened right behind the lampstand where everybody could see it. And so then, what happened when the king saw that? What?
He turned pale.
Yours says he turned pale. What does some other versions say?
His thoughts troubled him.
His what?
His thoughts troubled him.
His thoughts troubled him, right?
His knees were knocking.
And his knees were knocking, so you can just see him. Mine says his color changed, so I thought, well, did his blood pressure go up and he got red, or would he just go white as a sheet, you know? One of those two. His color changed, and his knees started shaking, and so he was afraid. He was terrified. You know, what is this? What's going on?
Well, he probably remember what happened to his dad.
Right? He could remember what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah. Hey, you know, this God is powerful. And so he calls in all these enchanters and the Chaldeans and the astrologers and all of the wise men, and he tells them, ask them to interpret it. And then they would be made third in the kingdom, third ruler in the kingdom. Now, why third ruler?
That's the father and son.
Right. He's the co-regent with his father, so they were co-regents, so the next one would be third, would be the third ruler. And so they all came in, but no one could read it. No one could figure out what it said. And then he was greatly alarmed when no one could interpret it. And his color changed more, and his lords were all perplexed. I think, what does yours say? Mine says perplexed. Do you have other language in the end of 9?
Mine says the lords were astonished.
Astonished, perplexed. I think, you know, everybody in the room, you can just hear them all talking. What does this mean? What's going on? What's happening? All right, then in verse 10, the queen hears about it. This was probably Nebuchadnezzar's wife. Not his wife, Nebuchadnezzar's wife. Because of the words of the king and his lords, she came into the banquet hall. And she says, oh, king, live forever, which is the protocol, right? Don't worry about it. I know somebody who can help you. Notice the descriptive language of this. You know, once again, to me, this shows that Daniel was really important and close to Nebuchadnezzar and his wife. Because they both, instead of calling him by his Babylonian name, you see they called him by his preferred name, Daniel, for one thing. But look how she describes him. She says that let not your thoughts alarm you. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. So she knew about his spirit, how spiritual he was, and that he heard from God. In the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. Like there's nobody smarter than him that I've ever met. He's just, his wisdom is like the wisdom of the gods. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, made him chief of the magicians, enchanters, Chaldeans, and astrologers, because an excellent spirit, knowledge, and understanding to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve problems were found in this Daniel. I mean, she just goes on and on telling about Daniel. This just tells us kind of his character in the kingdom. He's probably about 70 or 80 years old at this time. And he's been serving all through King Nebuchadnezzar's reign. And it just shows what she thought of him. Says, so call him in. He'll show you the interpretation. Call in this Daniel. So he was desperate. So he called in Daniel. But he kind of is degrading to him. I mean, the king answered and said to Daniel, "Oh, you're that Daniel, one of the exiles of Judah, whom the king my father brought from Judah." And of course, has been drinking from the vessels that came from Judah, so he knew that. And I've heard of you that the spirit of the gods is in you. Light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. All of my wise men and my enchanters aren't able to tell me what this means. And so, I would like, can you make known to me this interpretation? I've heard that you can give interpretations and solve problems. Notice it says, my version says now, if you can read the writing. He still really didn't believe that he could do it. If you can read the writing, this is verse 16, and make known to me its interpretation, then you'll be clothed with purple, have a chain of gold around your neck, and shall be called the third ruler in the kingdom. The first reward would be purple clothing. That was worn by royalty. The second reward would be a gold neck chain. And in Babylon, such chains could only be worn if given by a king. So he's offering him possessions, position, and power. That's all the world can give, is possessions, position, and power. What does Daniel think of those gifts? Daniel answered and said before the king, first of all, notice there's no protocol. He doesn't say, "Oh, king, live forever." You know, every other time when somebody's addressing the king, that's what they say. He doesn't bother. He just says, let your gifts be for yourself. Give your rewards to another. He was not interested in possessions, position, and power. But nevertheless, I'll tell you what it means. O king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar, your father, kingship and greatness and glory and majesty. It all came from God. Because of the greatness he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. But it was because of what God gave him. And whom he would he killed, whom he would he kept alive, whom he would he raised up, and whom he would he humbled. But when his heart was lifted up, and his spirit was hardened, so that he dealt proudly, he was full of pride, then he was brought down from his kingly throne, and his glory was taken from him. He was driven from among the children of mankind, and his mind was made like that of a beast, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. He was fed grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, until he knew that the God Most High rules the kingdom of mankind and sets over it whom he will. Belshazzar knew all this. Everybody knew what had happened to Nebuchadnezzar, but he just chose to ignore it. Everyone had read the proclamation. It says, "You, his son, have not humbled your heart, though you knew this. You've lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven. And the vessels of his house have been brought in before you, and you and your wives and concubines drank wine from them. You praise the gods of silver and gold and bronze and iron and stone. They can't see. They can't hear. They don't know anything. But the God in whose hand is your breath." I underlined that in my Bible. "The God in whose hand is your breath, and whose are all your ways you have not honored." He's the God that holds our breath. Now, why did Daniel refuse the gifts, do you think?
He'd already received it from Nebuchadnezzar.
Okay, he'd already been like third in the kingdom practically.
He did this as a friend to the king's mother, present king's mother.
I think he refused them because he knew Babylon was about to fall. It wouldn't matter if he was third in the kingdom, right? He knew what was going to happen. It had been prophesied. He believed this was the hand of God. Well, he knew what it said, too. So, what good were they doing? if Belshazzar was about to be killed. So then from his presence the hand was sent, and the writing was inscribed. And this is the writing that was inscribed: Mene, Mene, Tekel, and Upharsin. This is, the Talmud said this is probably what it looked like. Sure, that's right. No, that's not right. All right. This is an interesting fact, something that I think very interesting. If you read it from this way, it would be Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin. Down like this. This is how Hebrew is written. Is in this way. It starts from the right and goes left. Did you know that all the Eastern countries, right, they're like this? In Japan, all the way to Japan, all the way east from Israel. East of Israel, it's written like this. And the Western countries write it like this. But it's all in the direction of Israel. Just interesting fact. All right, the
But it
vowel.
wasn't written in Hebrew, right?
No,
Otherwise they would.
they didn't know. No, they
Somebody
didn't know
knows.
Hebrew. It was probably written in Aramaic, right? Because that was the language of the time. And I kind of tried to find what that was, but I couldn't find it. But anyway, so this would be Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin, written like this. All right.
I don't think it was written in any language known at the time, or somebody could have read it.
Well, but
They couldn't even read it,
they
let alone interpret it.
maybe they had no idea what it meant.
Possible.
Right. Right. Okay. That's a good thought too. The vowels were inferred. And they are in Hebrew too. In Hebrew, there's no vowels. There's just the consonants, and the vowels are inferred. That's why the same, I showed you that Yahweh, that's why Yahweh can also be interpreted as Jehovah, because it's the same consonants, but they just put the different vowels in. So, this is the interpretation of the matter. Mene means God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. It was written twice. Ever you see about something in the Bible twice, it's to indicate its certainty. This is going to happen. God had numbered the days of Belshazzar's kingdom. It was about to come to an end. Have you ever heard that phrase? His days were numbered. Comes from straight from Daniel. That's where it comes from. I also want to let's look real quick at Psalms 90, verse 12. Psalm 90, verse 12. Psalm 90, verse 12. Says, so teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. So God tells us to number our days. Our days are numbered. We know we're only going to live here a short time, really, on this earth, compared to eternity, and we're going to be with God in heaven. And so I've heard it described that we're all now in the winter of our lives. And it's important now that we number our days, that we make the most of the days that the Lord has given us. And there's a reason that we still have time here on this earth. He's still got a purpose for us. And so, He tells us to number our days and to, like I say, make the most of our time. Tekel means to be weighed. Belshazzar had been weighed in God's balance and found wanting. 1 Samuel 2:3, I'll just tell you, it says, by him actions are weighed. 1 Samuel 2:3. So he knows everything that we do and everything we're going to do, what our thoughts are. Now, the next word is parson. Your version may say parson. The U means and. The U is and. So mine just says and parson. And if it has an M on the end of it, that is plural. So it means to break into or to divide. Babylon would be shattered and broken and given to the Medes and Persians. And now notice that he says, your kingdom is divided and given. He spoke of it as though it had already been done. He knew the certainty of it. Some other phrases that come from this is, his number was up, or he saw the handwriting on the wall. Those are all phrases that we've heard that all come straight from Daniel chapter 5. I also wanted to I thought is interesting to look at some other passages that talk about the finger of God. This was God's finger writing this. And there's other places in the scriptures where we see the finger of God. So let's just look at a few of those just for fun. Exodus 8:19. Exodus 8:19. This is during the plagues in Egypt, and there'd been different times when they'd gone before his magicians had tried to replicate what Moses had done. But then finally, there was the plague of the gnats. And the magicians tried by their magic, and they could not replicate it. And so then the magician said to Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. So they knew that only God could do this. They recognized that it was the finger of God. And then Exodus 31:18.
I never understood that. Why would Pharaoh want more gnats?
Exactly, I know.
He did the same thing with the frogs.
Yeah.
His magicians actually produced more frogs.
They made the water into blood too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Exodus what?
that doesn't help. They couldn't stop it, but they could make more. Exodus 31:18. This is about the writing of the Ten Commandments upon Mount Sinai. And he gave them to Moses, and when he'd finished speaking with him on Mount Sinai, the 2 tablets of the testimony, which were the ones with the Ten Commandments. Also, by the way, it wasn't just the tablets of the Ten Commandments. He also brought down from the mountain the blueprints for the tabernacle at the same time. But anyway, both of those tablets, it says, were written with the finger of God. They were written with the finger of God. So that's another incident. And then there's one in the New Testament, and that is in John 8. John 8:1. Okay. John 8, chapter 1, verse 1. Actually, we're going to start with verse 2. John 8, chapter John 8, verse 2.
2.
Uh-huh. You ready? Okay. Early in the morning, he came again to the temple. All the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and placing her in the midst, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman's been caught in the act of adultery. Now, in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So, what do you say?" This they said to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. And as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground. But when they heard it, they went away, one by one, beginning with the older ones, and Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus stood up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, sin no more." He was writing. This was the finger of God writing on the ground. And it doesn't tell us what it was, but they evidently understood it, and they took note of what he said, right? So it was the finger. Whenever we read that, we wonder, what is it that he wrote? But just think, that was the finger of God writing in the sand. Okay. Now, at this point, Cyrus, it's the Medes and the Persians. This talks about Darius, but it's Cyrus and Darius that are the two rulers that are coming against. They came together, the Medes and the Persians. So it's Cyrus and Darius. Cyrus has 3 divisions outside the city. You know, one of the Euphrates rivers running through the city diagonally. And what he did was he set a division upstream, and they built a dam, and they diverted the river. And then when the water stopped, the other 2 divisions just walked right into the city. The Babylonians were caught by surprise. Before many of them knew what was happening, their city had fallen to the Medo-Persians without a major battle or destruction. They walked into the banquet hall and killed Belshazzar. Once again, God demonstrated his sovereignty. In spite of Babylon's great defenses, it fell in 1 day's time, just as God had foretold. In Isaiah 47:8, it says that they're going to fall in a day. Isaiah 47:8 and 9, if you want to look that up. It's the prophecy of Isaiah. He says it'll fall in 1 day. Now, there's something that I think is absolutely fascinating. After Cyrus conquers Babylon, Daniel goes up before him, and he opens up the scriptures in Isaiah. Isaiah 44. Let's look at that. Isaiah 44. Isaiah.
Who opened up the scriptures?
Daniel. Daniel took the scriptures before Cyrus. He actually read all of 44 and 45. We're just going to look at a portion of that. Isaiah 44, and we're going to start with verse 24. Now this was written 150 years before Cyrus was born. All right, this was written 150 years before Cyrus was born. And he goes before him and opens up the Hebrew scriptures, unrolls the scroll, and he reads to him. You all ready? Thus says the Lord, your Redeemer, who formed you from the womb. I am the Lord, who made all things, who alone stretched out the heavens, who spread out the earth by myself, who frustrates the signs of liars and makes fools of diviners, who turns wise men back and makes their knowledge foolish, who confirms the word of his servant and fulfills the counsel of his messengers, who says of Jerusalem, she shall be inhabited, and of the cities of Judah, they shall be built, and I will raise up their ruins, who says to the deep, be dry, I will dry up your rivers. Look at verse 28. Who says of Cyrus, the scriptures named Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and he shall fulfill all my purpose. Saying of Jerusalem, she shall be built, and of the temple, your foundation shall be laid. I'm going to read a little bit in 45. Thus says the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have grasped, to subdue nations before him, and to loose the belts of kings, to open doors before him, that gates may not be closed. I will go before you, and level the exalted places. I will break in pieces the doors of bronze, and cut through the bars of iron. I will give you the treasures of darkness and the hoards in secret places, that you may know that it is I, the Lord, the God of Israel, who called you by your name. For the sake of my servant Jacob and Israel, my chosen, I call you by your name. I name you, though you do not know me. I am the Lord, there is none other. Besides me, there is no God. I equip you, though you do not know me, that people may know from the rising of the sun and from the west that there is none besides me. I am the Lord, and there is no other. I form light and create darkness. I make well-being and create calamity. I am the Lord who does all these things. And it goes on. So he's talking directly to Cyrus. It was prophesied 150 years before. And Cyrus was impressed. And he freed the Jews. And then Daniel became part of Cyrus's rulers as well. I mean, a leader in Cyrus's government. So I mean, this is amazing that he was in the Babylonian government, and then he became high up in Cyrus's government as well. Now, let's look at 2 Chronicles 36. 2 Chronicles 36. You can read all about the Jews returning in Ezra and Nehemiah, but let's look at 2 Chronicles 36. That's right before Ezra and Nehemiah. By the way, while you're looking at that, do you know who the shortest man in the Bible is?
Nehemiah.
Nehemiah. Okay, this is the very end of 2 Chronicles 36, verse 22. It says, Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and also put it in writing. Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me, he recognized that God had given it to him, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever is among you of all his people, may the Lord his God be with him. Let him go up. And so that's why they were released and they went back home to Jerusalem, because Isaiah had prophesied it before, and Daniel then went before Cyrus and told him that he was going to be releasing the people. And so that's the rest of the story. Okay. Actually, the last verse should be the beginning of chapter 6. Darius the Mede received the kingdom being about 62 years old. So there again, it was Cyrus and Darius Cyrus was the Persian king and Darius was the Mede king.